I like to start off these presentations by saying that my name is David Cobb. I am a proud, I am a patriotic, and these days I am a pissed-off American citizen. Oh, good. I like to see that response because I also will self-identify as a progressive and proud of it. And frankly, folks, I think that we, as progressives, make a mistake if we allow the Tea Party to claim some sort of monopoly on political anger. It really is important because, frankly, folks, we have to understand something, that if you sit down and talk to a Tea Party supporter or adherent, and you say, well, why are you mad? And you really dig down with them and have a conversation, I have done so, and I have found almost universally that what they're angry about is the fact that Wall Street America destroyed the economy, and then the federal government rewarded them with $1 trillion of our tax money. Well, you know what? I'm angry about that too, aren't you? And I don't want the Tea Party to be the only place where other Americans see that anger expressed. And I'll go one step further. I'm also angry about the fact that 25% of the children in the United States of America go to bed hungry at night. And I don't hear that anger at Tea Party rallies. I'm also angry about the fact that 1 in 6 families are living below the poverty level in the richest country the world has ever produced. And I don't hear that anger at Tea Party rallies. And I'll go one step further. I'm angry about the fact that the political, economic institutions of this country are destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself. And I don't hear that anger at Tea Party rallies. And I'm angry at the fact that the United States of America is fundamentally a racist, sexist, and class-oppressive society. And I damn sure don't hear that expressed at Tea Party rallies. And I want to be clear about something. I think that we need to come to terms with the fact that the anger that I'm describing, that so many of you are feeling as well, is a righteous anger. You see, it's a righteous anger because if you get angry about something and just stay stewing in anger, that's a very dangerous place to be. That's not a good anger. But a righteous anger provokes us and, in fact, compels us to action. And by way of example, I will tell you that it was righteous anger that actually fueled the abolitionist movement. They were angry at the depraved institution of slavery. It was righteous anger that propelled those women of Seneca Falls to be willing to stand up against patriarchy. It was righteous anger that built the civil rights movement. Righteous anger led the trade union movement. Righteous anger is a good thing because it requires us to act in a righteous manner to correct an injustice. Righteous anger is a good thing. And I want to be clear about the fact that as we put this into context, I'm also angry because I can remember when I could say that I was a proud and patriotic American without any other qualifier. And for me, that's when I was a little boy. When I was taught that I was from the United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, and that my country stood for liberty and justice and equality. And I was so proud to be from that country. And not only that, but my country was like some great shining light on the hill. And it was going to guarantee liberty and justice and equality to everybody in the world. And I was so damn proud to be from that country. And I'm angry because I grew up and realized I had been lied to. But it's not the kind of lie that you normally think about because actually I have a face. I have a name for who I associate that with. And for me, that name, that person, was Mrs. Armstrong, my 5th grade teacher. And before I go any further, I want to ask, are there any current, former, or future teachers in this room? Would you raise your hand? Can we get a round of applause for all those hands that just went up? I need that. Thank you. And I do that for 2 reasons. Number one, I don't think that we appreciate and applaud teachers enough in this society. We damn sure don't pay them enough money. And I want to do that in honor of Mrs. Armstrong. Because you see, Mrs. Armstrong was a public school teacher. She did not go to bed at night saying, "Wah-ah-ah-ah. Now I can't wait until those children come into my room so I can fill their mind full of lies and propaganda." No! Mrs. Armstrong was a teacher, a good woman. She became a teacher because she wanted to prepare children to be productive members of society. She was committed to teaching us critical thinking. She wanted to actually help prepare us. You see, Mrs. Armstrong told that story the creation myth of this country because she believed it. And I'll go one step further and tell you that it worked on me, it worked on my classmates as I'm watching how you're reacting to me. Those of you who had public school in this country, it worked on you too, because you and me and my classmates wanted to believe it. You see, we want to live in liberty and justice and equality. And I'll tell you, it's important for us to recognize that we wanted those things not because we're Americans. We wanted those things because we're human beings. And I want to suggest to you that we've got to really come to terms with and begin to think and act with the acknowledgement and the recognition that Iraqi children want that too. And Israeli children want that. And Palestinian children. And Mexican children. And Senegalese children. You see, really what we've got to come to terms with is that what we are taught as the creation myth of this country is actually a crystallization of human desire. And that's why I'm so proud to be speaking to you in honor and recognition of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because what we need so desperately at this time of global crises is a human rights movement. We need to start thinking and acting as a member of the human family. We need to start thinking and acting as if we are connected. And you know why we need to start doing that? Because we are. We are connected. We are as surely connected to one another as every other life is connected. And I think that for me, what I have come to realize and understand is that when we begin to have a framework, a genuine global human rights framework, and we contextualize it that way, it actually puts us not just in a historical context and legacy of all the great social movements of the United States, but I get to actually claim the Paris Commune. You know, I get to claim all of the efforts of human beings who have struggled for liberation and for justice all across the world. It becomes so uplifting for me, and it becomes so inspiring to me to realize that there is a trajectory. And as Martin Luther King Jr. often said, the arc of the universe may be long, but it bends towards justice. It bends towards justice. We are on the right side. We are on the right side of history, and a big shout out to the folks at Occupy who reminded us that what we have to do is get engaged. We have to get engaged, because the arc may bend towards justice, but let me tell you something. When enough of us actually put our shoulders to the wheel, we can bend it even quicker. Right? I tell you, and there is a great remedy. Anytime you are feeling apathetic and cynical, there is a great remedy for it. Get involved in social justice efforts. It's just that simple. I promise you, if you get involved in whatever it is that calls to you to do that feels righteous and just, you will find a cure for your cynicism. And it's an amazing thing. And I want to say, folks, it is true, as Dave Adia said, I am a lawyer, but I sometimes say I'm a recovering lawyer. You know, I was subjected to law school, but the reality is I practiced law for a decade. And I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is that even though I was expecting that I would learn to administer justice and the court system would be a place where justice was administered, that that's simply not true. That the legal system, like most other major systems, are designed to perpetuate the existing institutions. And if, like me, you believe that the existing institutions are fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive, guess what they tend to perpetuate? Right? And so I was unable to continue to practice law because I found with the right fact pattern and a lot of luck, I might be able to get justice for an individual client, but the rules of the system were perverted. The rules were never actually designed to ensure justice, right? And so I began to look at the bigger picture, right? I began to ask myself, well, how can we actually change these rules? Can these rules be changed? I started to ask first principle questions. And in so doing, I came to realize that the role of the transnational corporation was not just exercising power today. I don't even talk about corporate power anymore, because that doesn't do it justice. Corporations aren't just exercising power, they are ruling us. As surely as masters once ruled slaves, as surely as kings once ruled subjects, unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling us because they are making the fundamental public policy decisions that affect all of our lives. They're deciding how much toxics will be in the water that we all drink or the air that we all breathe. They decide what our transportation choices will be. They decide what kind of health care we'll get, or more often than not, what kind of health care we won't get. They decide what our energy choices will be. They decide whether or not this country goes to war. We are left to choose between paper or plastic. We're given 17 choices of toothpaste, 32 flavors of ice cream. We are inundated with consumer choices, provided you have enough money to buy it. But we're placated with material choices, but almost never do we actually have an opportunity to engage in honest conversation about how our society should be structured. And if we had a democracy, we would. And so what I'm going to do in a very short period of time is to try to share with you my understanding of how the U.S. constitutional framework operates and why it is that I have never been more excited about the prospect for systemic change in this country. Because I want to say something very clearly and very, very unapologetically. I am a nonviolent revolutionary. Thank you for the applause, because I think that we need to get more comfortable saying that. And I want to be clear, I am nonviolent about it, but I am damn sure a revolutionary. And I think that we need to actually reclaim that attitude. To reclaim that. I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it's an honorable call to challenge the inherent systemic oppression that is being visited upon individuals and the planet today. So here is my attempt to explain how it is that corporations have actually hijacked our government, and they're using our legal institutions in order to perpetuate it and then to legalize it. All right? So in order to do so, since we're talking about the legal system, we are taught, and it is certainly true, that there is one document that is considered the Charter of the United States. That document is the document that lays out the governmental framework. It's the supreme law of the land. What document am I talking about? The U.S. Constitution. So very quickly, I'm going to ask, how many people here have read the Constitution in the last year? Be honest, raise your hand. Oh, good. Lots of hands go up. So I'm going to ask you, honestly, y'all grade my papers and see if I get this right. I will submit to you that if you understand the Constitution, there is broadly two actors that are at play in the Constitution. The first actor is the most important actor. In fact, it's the first three words of that document. All I ever have to do is put my hand to my ear, and people will say those words in unison. Those are hallowed words in this country, and they should be. We the people are important. We the people are the most important part of that document. And we the people come together in order to create the second actor, which is government itself. When you read this document, what you will see is that we the people are described as being free and sovereign. And the word sovereign, does anybody know what the word sovereign means? It's based out of independence, but what it means is the authority to rule. Whoever has the authority to rule is considered the sovereign. It's why 500 years ago, who was the sovereign? The king. The king. 500 years ago, the king claimed authority, right? And where did the king claim his authority? God. You don't get more legitimate, right? But we said no. The king's not sovereign, we are sovereign. And in fact, government is not sovereign. Government is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? People. Government is accountable to whom? The people. I like how that's going. It's got a ring to it, doesn't it? We the people are free and sovereign because we have rights. Government does not have rights. Government has duties. I don't want to stop for a moment and really underscore this, because we are here celebrating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the definition of human rights are those rights that you have inherent and inalienable merely by being a human being. It doesn't have anything to do with the nation state. It doesn't have anything to do with that you've earned it or that you've been a good boy or any of that, right? It means that you are a human being and therefore you have rights that are inherent and inalienable. Government does not have rights against the people, ever. Government has only duties. And duties, to be clear, that means if I have the right to do something, I don't need anybody's permission to exercise that right. I can just do it because I'm a human being. One of the things that I like to say is, to really understand what I mean about those kind of rights, I'm going to show you, demonstrate. Don't get alarmed, it's only one button. Those in the back, I don't know if y'all can see that, but up front, you can tell I'm pointing at my belly button. And I want to encourage all of you who may be too shy to check here publicly, go home. Check in the privacy of your own home. Make sure you got a belly button, because if you do, you also have human rights. That's all it takes to really underscore, right? Those rights mean that I can exercise them and they cannot be violated by other individuals or by government. And that's very important because government that is the exercise of the sovereign will of the collective body. However, the one thing government can never do is violate our individual human rights. And government has only duties. And what does that mean? Well, to put it into perspective, all power resides with the people. All power is with the people. In fact, power to the people is a very powerful, I think the power to the phrase is almost magic. It invokes something amazing. In fact, I like to point out that it's not just a Black Panther Party chant, although it was. It was also an American Revolutionary chant. It's also a chant that you're hearing in Tahrir Square and all across the country. Those are magical words. So I will invite you. I'm going to say those words, and I'll just invite you to say it back. And if you're so inclined, I would invite you to do so. I'll say, power to the people.
Power to the people.
I'm going to say it again. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
I'm going to do it one more time. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
See, I love to do this. And I do it everywhere I go for two very important reasons. Number one, because I want us to have that experience. I want us to say it and have you, and I wish that you were seeing what I'm seeing back. The beaming smiles, right? I mean, didn't it feel good, y'all? Right? It felt good. And the other thing is, if I raised my fist, lots of you did it too, right? Yeah, you did, right? Several of you did. Several folks did. The second reason I do this is because I like it. It makes me feel good. It reminds me of how much power we actually do have. See, the problem is that we're not exercising our power. That's a big part of it. So all power is inherent in the people, but I want to be clear about something. Like, how do we exercise that power collectively? You know, it's important to recognize that I think that Rochester, the city of Rochester proper, has got, what, 200,000, 250,000 people, something like that? You know, I'm really glad that the people of Rochester have the power, but I don't know about you, but I do not want to go to the meeting of 250,000 people where we decide where all the stop signs go. You know what I mean? All the power is with the people, but we delegate a certain amount of that power to government. Why would we do that? To exercise and discharge the duties. Think of it this way. Well, the U.S. Constitution codifies the social contract, how, broadly speaking, how we want our society to operate. But in a representative republic, what we say is we are going to charge certain elected officials to administer our decisions collectively. So, and the one thing that government can never do is violate our inherent rights in the process. I mean, this is a very amazing thing. I look at this and I think, oh wow, think of it this way. In our private sphere, we have absolute rights that cannot be violated. But the Constitution doesn't end there. It's not just a civil libertarian document, it's also a communitarian document because there is an appreciation and understanding for the public sphere. That we the people are free and sovereign with rights as we relate as private human beings. But that we come together as government and we charge government that is still subordinate to the will of the people to perform the duties that we collectively want them to do. There's a communitarian ethos about it. Isn't that wonderful? It's actually satisfying a civil libertarian impulse and a communitarian impulse at the same time. This is magical. This is brilliant. We should try that in this country. This would totally work. And I'm not even joking. This is brilliant. No wonder Mrs. Armstrong taught me this. This is brilliant. The problem is not in this framework. The problem is we've never actually experienced it. Because before I go 1 second further waxing poetic about the brilliance and the beauty of the U.S. Constitution, time out. Somebody tell me what year this document gets either drafted in secret convention or gets actually ratified. 1789. Nicely done. We have a historian in the crowd. 1789. The reason I want to get a date certain is because I have a very important question to ask. In 1789, when this brilliant document actually becomes the supreme law of the land, who gets to be a legal person with rights? White men with property, right? Another way to ask that question is, what percentage of the adult human beings living in the 13 original colonies were actually legal persons with rights? I'm not treating you with children, like actually of the adult human beings. What's the percentage? 1%. 1%. You know, that's a great phrase, but sir, you're so cynical. It's not 1%. It's 5%. Think about that for a moment. Another way to say that number, of course, is that 95% of the adult human beings living in the founding of this country did not have the core rights that were protected by this document that we are taught here. Another way to say that is that for all the beauty of this document, and it is a beautiful document, in its implementation, in its original implementation, the founding of this country is a founding violence. It's obviously a founding violence against the indigenous people who were already here and were subject to intentional, deliberate genocide. And that is the truth, and it must be told. It is also a founding violence against those Africans who were brought at the barrel of a gun or the point of a spear and forced to build this country with slave labor. Because the reality is the White House that President Barack Obama currently occupies was built by enslaved Africans. And that's the truth, and it must be told. It's also a founding violence against women. Because it's not just that women couldn't vote. I mean, that's the least of it. Women couldn't even own property.
That's wrong.
Women were property for all intents and purposes in the founding of this country. The point I'm making is that it's also a founding violence against most of the white men. Because most of the white men were actually not fully legal persons with full rights because they were either indentured servants or at best second-class citizens. So one very important way to look at all of U.S. history is as a series of struggles by actual human beings to be defined as legal people with rights that are protected by our Constitution. That's so important, I'm going to say it again, because I really want you to come away with this. I think that this is maybe the linchpin for me of how I've begun to think about the Constitution and legal personhood and how important it is. Our entire country has been a series of struggles by actual human beings to be defined as persons with rights that would be protected by our Constitution. And so, in a very real way, some people might say, all right, Cobb, get over it because we got rid of slavery. Women can vote. It's all good now. To which I say, au contraire, mon frere. It's not all good now. Because it really is time for us to really come to terms with the most dominant institution in our society today that's not on this board yet. What's that? What would you say is the most dominant economic institution on not just in the United States, but on planet Earth today? The corporation. And so I will actually say, I hope this is helpful. Is this helpful for people to sort of think about this? All right, good. I'm glad. Because it's helpful for me. And so if this is helpful, and if I'm right that there is a difference between sovereign and subordinate, if I'm correct that there's a difference between rights and duties, and I am, then it behooves us to say, well, where would the corporation go on this framework? Well, in order to answer that question, I will ask, does anybody know what it takes to form a corporation in New York State today? $50, 3 people, file some paperwork with the Secretary of State, and do you know what will happen? It will be rubber stamped, and as long as your check cashes and you have filled out the form correctly, you will be issued articles of incorporation. A corporate charter will be issued to you. It's just that easy. And as long as you pay your annual franchise fee, do you know how long your corporation can last? Forever. And you know what you can do in New York law with your corporation? There's a term of art in the New York Corporation Code. Anything that is legally permissible. And I say, well, if I'm paying attention, apparently you can do a whole lot of illegal things and get away with it. But I just want you to see, like, the idea of the corporation, how it comes into being. And now let's compare it to 1789. In 1789, to create a corporation, you had to go to the state legislature and get a majority of the state assembly or the lower house to pass a bill by a majority. Then that same bill had to go to the upper house, and it had to pass by a majority, and then the governor had to be willing to sign it. What does that sound like today? It's a law. The mechanics of a law. That's how difficult it was to get a corporate charter issued. And in the process, that's just the mechanics. The content. You had to prove that there was a public need that was not being met by existing private business or by governmental agent action. So you had to prove a public need, and if you were given the privilege, not the right, but the privilege of incorporation, you would be granted a corporate charter. And all you could ever do was the very specific thing that you had identified. And do you know what happened to your corporate charter if you strayed from that, if you tried to do something else? Your corporate charter was revoked. The corporate death penalty would be issued against you. Oh, and by the way, do you know how long your corporate charter would typically last? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. They were all very narrowly tailored, right? You could only do a certain thing, and you could only do it for a certain period of time. And do you know what happened at the end of that time period? The corporation automatically dissolved. Even if you weren't doing anything wrong. Oh, and by the way, if you were doing the very specific thing that you had been granted a charter to do, and it was during that time period, if you were ever to be found acting outside the public interest, do you know what happened to your corporate charter? It was revoked. Corporate charters were routinely revoked in this country for the first 75 years of our history. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this was the land of milk and honey, because the ruling elite were using different institutions at the time. They weren't using corporations to oppress. They were using slavery. They were using patriarchy. They were using oppression of work. They were using different ways. But what I am suggesting to you is that the corporation as an instrument was once very tightly controlled in these United States of America. That is our historic legacy, right? We have the capacity to recall from our own history a time where the instrument of the corporation was tightly controlled. So, I just want to be clear about what a corporation is and why. To put it plainly, in order to create a corporation, it requires a governmental action. The state has to issue that charter. That charter has historically been used to hold corporations accountable. The charter describes the duties of what a corporation may or may not do. Properly understood, a corporation should only be allowed to exist if it acts in the public interest. I would tell you, properly understood, a corporation must be on this side of the line. And so, folks, and here is the kicker. So when the United States Supreme Court, in an act of supreme judicial activism, how's that for the right wing, comes in and says, oh no, we say a corporation should be considered a person with rights that cannot be violated, it perverts this whole framework. See, corporate personhood is not just a stupid idea, which it is. Corporate personhood is not just illogical, which it is. Corporate personhood is one of the linchpins for how the ruling elite have hijacked our government, our country, all of our institutions, and as a lawyer, what really chaps my hide is that they use the legal system to legalize their theft of our democracy. That's the problem, and you couple that with another legal doctrine that they created out of whole cloth, that money is speech. And so therefore, the rich and the wealthy can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our elections, right? The infrastructure of democracy. Again, we can't have confidence in the integrity of our electoral process. We can't have confidence in anything in this country. So, Move to Amend is a multiracial, multi-ethnic group of people who have come together. We are all over the country. And we have said, with the same commitment and the same courage and the same conviction that we will win, that the abolitionists did, that the women's suffrage movement did, that the trade union movement did, that says, this is our country. And we're not going to allow the United States Supreme Court to steal it from us with illegitimate rulings telling us what our governing document says. They are wrong. When the court says corporations are persons, they're as wrong in that case, Santa Clara versus Pacific Railway or the Citizens United case, both of which are incorrect. They're just as wrong as the court was when they said in Dred Scott that no black man has any rights that a white man is bound to respect. That's what the Supreme Court said then, and they were wrong. The court also said, in Minor versus Hepper, said that women are not women are not persons for purposes of the 14th Amendment. They were wrong. The court was wrong in Plessy versus Ferguson when they said separate but equal was acceptable in public accommodations under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The reality is, folks, the court has frequently been wrong. And when they are wrong, it is up to us. It's not just our right, it's our duty to correct them. It's our duty. And frankly, I gotta say, folks, we stand on the shoulders of giants in this country. I mean, those people who went before us and trailblazed for us to actually begin the process, every single one of the movements that I've mentioned at their core were about rights. Every single one were about human beings being defined as legal persons and having the protections and the right to participate in this system. And when we just allow the Supreme Court to install a president, when we allow the court to basically delegitimize our electoral process, when we allow the court to overturn democratically enacted laws attempting to protect the environment or protect workers' rights or protect the public health and safety, we are not doing our jobs. Our job as engaged citizens is actually not just to participate by voting. It is to engage in the political process. And I don't mean just voting, I mean doing everything that is possible to create the society that we want to live in. Because if we get down to it, poll after poll shows the overwhelming majority of Americans want to transition away from the coal and oil and other fossil fuels that are driving the global climate crisis. And yet, the oil companies control energy policy. Poll after poll shows that the majority of Americans want access to health care as a fundamental human right. And yet, it is treated as a commodity to be bought and paid for as a product. The overwhelming majority of Americans, poll after poll, shows that they want an end to the illegitimate, immoral, and unethical, and unconstitutional wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the bombs continue to fall. Right? I want to conclude with this thought. We know by polling data that even though Americans are subjected to propaganda in a way that no other country actually experiences propaganda. See, our propaganda is more subtle. Right? Our propaganda is not, you will think only what we tell you to think and you will be punished if you don't. Our propaganda goes, we'll just tell you what to think about. And the truth is there, you have to dig for it, but none of the broadcast media, I don't even call it mainstream media anymore. Let's call it what it really is, corporate media. Right? The corporate media constantly inundates us with messaging and messages, buy more stuff. Buy more stuff, right? That's the constant message. And, the other thing is, everything's okay. And if anything goes bad, go shopping. Right? Are we sensing a pattern here? Right? So our propaganda is so much more subtle because it's designed intentionally to turn us into mindless consumers and obedient workers. Right? It doesn't educate us. It doesn't teach us to think critically about what's going on in the rest of the world. We're not actually getting information, much less news and analysis. Right? So I think that for me, the Move to Amend effort is actually reminding us that we do have power. That we actually have not only the capacity, but we do have the responsibility. And I will conclude with this. The last time I was here in Rochester, we had about 20,000 people participating in the Move to Amend Coalition. I come to you tonight, I checked on the website, 150,000 people we've turned over. 150,000. When I came last time, we had 6 local affiliates, or chapters. Today we have 35. We had plans to put the issue of corporate personhood on the ballot so that people could vote on it. Since that time, we have not only put it on the ballot, but we have won that election in Madison, Wisconsin, in Dane County, in Missoula, Montana, in Boulder, Colorado, in Humboldt County, California. And check this out. When we put it on the ballot, do you believe that we should amend the Constitution to abolish corporate personhood and abolish money as speech? We win it by about 3/4 of the vote. 75%, 78% of the votes. It's cutting across political ideology. It's cutting across party identification. It's winning, it's winning, it's winning. And because, and I will say this, I really genuinely believe this, because of the work that many of you have been doing, we are now seeing the U.S. Congress starting to introduce amendments to the Constitution. Right? They're not what they should be yet, because we say we need to abolish all corporate constitutional rights and make it clear that money is not speech. See, I don't want to just get rid of corporate personhood and still let the Koch brothers spend unlimited amounts of their individual money. So we have to abolish both legal corporate personhood and money as speech, right? And we can't just get money out of politics, because then you will still allow the corporate elite to overturn our democratically enacted laws. Because, let's remember, Citizens United came down on January 21st of 2010. Will anybody make the case that we had a functioning democratic republic on January 20th of 2010? Right? This has been a long time that we have allowed corporate power to concentrate.